Imagine an employee who hits every single metric. Like they execute every assigned task perfectly.
They show up on time.
Right. Always on time. And they never complain. I mean, on paper, they are the ideal worker.
The absolute dream employee.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And yet this exact person might be the primary reason your organization is, slowly failing from the inside out.
Yeah, it sounds totally counterintuitive.
It really does.
Yeah.
But welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at the hidden crisis of what we're calling the compliant ghost.
It's a great term for it.
Because we usually think of professional burnout as this, spectacular explosion, right? Someone screaming, throwing their hands up, and storming out the door.
Or sending that highly aggressive company-wide email before they quit.
Oh, yeah, the bridge burner email. But our source material today reveals a much quieter and honestly far more insidious problem. We were exploring a really comprehensive academic article by Dr. Jonathan H. Westover.
Right. The psychological architecture of teacher engagement.
That's the one.
Yeah.
And it's just fascinating.
It really is a remarkable piece of research because it forces us to look past those surface-level metrics. Attendance, compliance, the stuff we always measure.
Right.
Dr. Westover investigates why some educators fundamentally thrive, while others just hollowly survive. And he specifically looks at the high-stakes, highly pressurized environment of private primary education.
So the mission for our deep dive today is to really decode the actual underlying psychological drivers of professional commitment.
Which is so much deeper than just getting a paycheck.
100%. We're going to map out the startling relationship between your well-being, your environment, and this concept called work ethic.
And we'll look at how a few, frankly, radical schools are completely redesigning the concept of the workplace to save their educators.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because having a teacher simply show up and recite a lesson plan, that is no longer the standard for success. We are dealing with these compliant ghosts.
Yeah, the crisis Dr. Westover identifies is characterized by educators who are technically, and I mean strictly, technically fulfilling all their administrative duties.
Ticking all the boxes.
Exactly. They submit their meticulously formatted lesson plans, they grade the tests on time, they monitor the hallways.
But they exhibit absolutely zero emotional investment in the outcome.
None. They are physically present, but psychologically completely absent. And this deeply damages instructional effectiveness.
Because the kids can tell, right?
Oh, kids are incredibly perceptive. More crucially, it fractures the fundamental student-teacher relationship. To understand the mechanics of why this happens, the text breaks down true, authentic work engagement into 3 interrelated dimensions.
Okay, let's hear them.
Well, first, we have to separate engagement from mere compliance. The first dimension is vigor.
And vigor sounds like, something you get from a triple shot of espresso.
Right, like you're just bouncing off the wall.
Yeah. But the text takes it much deeper than just physical energy, doesn't it?
It does. Vigor is actually about high levels of mental and emotional resilience. It is the psychological elasticity required to bounce back.
Elasticity. I like that.
Think about it. If you are teaching an elementary school class, your carefully planned lesson might be entirely derailed by a fire alarm.
Or a student having a massive meltdown.
Exactly. Or just the sheer chaotic energy of 25 children on a rainy day when they can't go outside for recess.
Oh man, rainy day recess is the worst.
It's pure survival mode. So vigor is the cognitive capacity to absorb that disruption, regulate your own frustration, and immediately pivot the energy of the room back to learning.
Which brings us to the second dimension, dedication. Because, if you're going to constantly bounce back from that kind of chaos, you need a profound reason to do it.
I really do.
The text describes dedication as finding a deep sense of pride and inspiration in the work. It's this major psychological shift. You stop seeing teaching as a transaction, just, trading hours for a paycheck, and you start seeing it as a central defining role in your life.
Which naturally culminates in the third dimension, absorption.
Okay, break down absorption for us.
Absorption is really the pinnacle of engagement. It is full, unfractured concentration. Psychologists actually often refer to this as a flow state.
Oh, like when an athlete is just completely in the zone?
Exactly like that. The text highlights a phenomenon called temporal distortion, which literally means losing track of time during a lesson.
Wow.
When a teacher is fully absorbed, they are not just reading off a script. They are hyper-tuned to the subtle micro-expressions of their students.
Right, like they notice when a kid in the back row just slightly furrows their brow in confusion.
Yes. And they seamlessly adjust their explanation in real time without even missing a beat.
That level of presence requires massive cognitive bandwidth. But before we get to how you build that bandwidth, we need to clarify a massive misconception here.
Oh, this is so important.
People constantly conflate being engaged with just being happy at work.
They really do.
The text makes a hard line here. Work engagement is not job satisfaction, and it is not organizational commitment.
That distinction is paramount.
Yeah.
Because job satisfaction is just about how much you like your environment. You can love your school's healthcare benefits, the generous vacation
A
time.
really nice espresso machine in the break room.
Exactly, the friendly colleagues. And organizational commitment just means you are fiercely loyal to the brand of the school. You never want to work anywhere else.
Right.
But here's the kicker. You can possess both of those attitudes. You can be highly satisfied and deeply committed and still completely zone out and phone it in during a Tuesday morning math lesson.
Yes. I think of it like, it's like the difference between a roommate who pays rent on time and dutifully does their assigned chores.
Which is great, by the way.
It's great, but that's just compliance and commitment. Versus a roommate who actually makes the apartment feel like a warm, inviting home.
I love that analogy.
Paying the rent is compliance. Making it a home requires vigor, dedication, and absorption. And for decades, it feels like management has just been measuring the rent, completely ignoring the home.
What's fascinating here is how this dynamic fractures further through a concept called domain specificity.
Domain specificity. Okay, what does that mean in practice?
Well, human psychology isn't a single switch that you just flip to engaged or disengaged for your entire 8-hour shift. Engagement is highly contextual.
Oh, I see.
A teacher might display incredible vigor and absorption when they are directly interacting with a student who is finally understanding a complex science concept. But that exact same teacher might become practically catatonic when tasked with pastoral care duties.
Wait, just to make sure we're on the same page and listeners are tracking this, pastoral care isn't about teaching academics, right?
Correct.
We're talking about the emotional mentoring, like navigating a student's anxiety attack, mediating a conflict between two kids, or dealing with intense family dynamics.
That is correct. Pastoral care is heavy, heavy emotional labor. And when you layer in the private school context that Dr. Westover focuses on, that emotional labor multiplies exponentially.
Because it's a totally different ecosystem than public school.
Completely different. Unlike public schools with standardized civil service protections and guaranteed funding, private schools operate in a hyper-competitive market.
Right, they have to attract tuition-paying parents.
Exactly. So teachers are subtly, or sometimes overtly, expected to manage parent satisfaction. They have to act as informal marketers and constantly promote the institution's brand.
And those specific domains can rapidly drain a teacher's vigor, leaving basically nothing left in the tank for the actual classroom instruction.
Precisely.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting. If true engagement is this fragile, deep internal state of vigor, dedication, and absorption, we have to figure out where it actually comes from.
And this is Dr. Westover's central paradigm-shifting finding.
It completely upends how we usually think about motivating human beings. Because the conventional wisdom is that if you want a more engaged employee, you manipulate the external organizational factors.
Carrots and sticks.
Right. You pay them a bonus, you offer a promotion, you give them a better parking spot.
And the research data dismantles that assumption entirely. External factors can prevent dissatisfaction, which is important, but they cannot manufacture engagement.
So what does?
The foundational drivers of true engagement are internal psychological resources, specifically a teacher's psychological well-being.
Okay, so well-being.
Yes, and the text defines this well-being through specific pillars, like self-acceptance, a sense of autonomy, environmental mastery.
Environmental mastery, like controlling your classroom.
Yeah, feeling capable of managing your daily surroundings and not feeling constantly overwhelmed. And lastly, a profound sense of purpose.
But, and this is key, the text doesn't just say well-being equals engagement. There's a very specific sequential mechanism at play here.
Right, it's a process.
Well-being exerts a direct influence on engagement, sure, but it has a massive indirect effect that is mediated through a completely different concept: work ethic.
This part is crucial.
I had to stop and reread this section multiple times because normally, when a manager talks about work ethic, they mean an employee who is perfectly willing to answer emails at 11:00 p.m. on a Sunday.
The hustle culture definition.
Exactly. They treat it like a genetic trait you are either born with or you aren't.
But in the context of the psychological architecture, work ethic is redefined entirely. It is not about hours logged. It is an internalized value system regarding the moral meaning and societal importance of the work itself.
How you view what you do.
Exactly. Teachers who view their profession as a moral calling bring a totally different psychological orientation to the classroom than someone who views it merely as employment.
And the sequence Dr. Westover maps out is profound. An environment that protects psychological well-being naturally constructs this internalized work ethic. And it is that deeply held work ethic that ultimately generates the vigor, dedication, and absorption.
Yes, work ethic is a byproduct of well-being, not a prerequisite.
Wait, I need to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Because if we say that engagement is driven by internal psychological resources and finding your own work ethic, isn't this the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card for terrible management?
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Right.
Yeah.
Can't a school with abysmal pay, incredibly toxic leadership, and an impossible 60-hour work week just tell their burned-out teachers to, I don't know, meditate, do some yoga, and find your internal work ethic?
That is such a valid concern. This raises a really important question, and it addresses the very danger of misinterpreting the data.
Because that sounds like a nightmare.
It would be, but the text explicitly warns against using psychological resilience to mask structural abuse. It does not let organizations off the hook.
Okay, good.
It argues the exact opposite, actually. You cannot mandate well-being or demand a strong work ethic if the environment is actively hostile to human psychology.
You can't just yoga your way out of a toxic workplace.
Exactly. Building and protecting that internal foundation requires intense, uncompromising structural support from the organization.
So it's not about giving people a mindfulness app. It's about eliminating the structural stressors that make them lose their minds in the first place.
Perfectly said.
Which transitions us beautifully from all this psychological theory into the concrete, radical ways real-world schools are actually redesigning their environments to protect that foundation.
Yes, let's look at the practical applications.
Rather than looking at a dozen different little attempts, let's focus on how a few specific schools practically rewired the psychological architecture of their staff. Let's start with Oakwood Elementary in Ireland.
Oakwood is a brilliant example. It's a masterclass in addressing the structural reality of cognitive load. They recognized that their teachers were depleted, but rather than offering empty wellness seminars,
Or like a pizza party.
right, no pizza parties, they conducted rigorous, unforgiving time audits, and they discovered their staff was working 56-hour weeks during the term, largely bogged down by administrative compliance.
56 hours. That's insane.
It is. So the leadership's response was surgical. They ruthlessly cut documentation requirements by 40%.
40% just gone.
Just gone. They looked at every single recurring meeting, cut the scheduled time in half, and substituted asynchronous written communication wherever possible.
They essentially did a Marie Kondo sweep of the entire operational handbook.
That's a great way to put it.
They literally held up every form, every weekly meeting, and asked, does this spark actual educational value? And if the answer was no, they threw it in the trash.
Which takes immense courage, by the way, because institutions are terrified of shedding bureaucracy.
Oh, they cling to it like a safety blanket.
Yeah.
But if we connect this to the mechanism we just discussed, cutting paperwork directly fuels absorption. Well, if a teacher's brain is secretly stressing about a 10-page compliance form that's due at 3:00 p.m., their cognitive RAM is full. They physically cannot achieve that temporal distortion or flow state during a 1:00 p.m. math lesson.
That makes perfect sense. The structural fix directly liberates the psychological bandwidth.
Exactly.
We see a similar structural commitment to well-being at Bright Horizons Academy in Singapore, but they tackled the emotional labor side of the equation.
The pastoral care stuff we talked about.
Right. Recognizing the immense strain of pastoral care, they partnered with independent external counselors to provide therapy for the staff.
External.
Yes, the critical words there are independent and external. It was completely confidential and entirely free.
Because if the school's HR department is running the counseling, no teacher is going to admit they're having a breakdown.
Of course not.
They'd be terrified it will end up on their performance review.
Exactly. But because Bright Horizons made it truly independent, an astounding 34% of the staff utilized the service over 2 years.
34%. Over a third of the workforce raised their hand and said, I need help processing this emotional load.
Yeah, and by removing the stigma and the fear, they directly fortified the self-acceptance and positive relationships pillars of well-being.
Which in turn stabilized their work ethic and kept them in the profession.
Kept them from becoming compliant ghosts.
Right. But perhaps the most fascinating structural redesign comes from the Montessori Academy of Excellence in the U.S. Because they didn't just remove negatives, like bad meetings or emotional stress. They engineered the work to be inherently more meaningful.
Oh, the looping model.
Yes, they utilized a looping model. In a traditional system, a teacher has a class for 9 months and then hands them off to the next grade level.
Sí, lo daré.
Right. But in looping, the teacher stays with the exact same cohort of students for 2 or even 3 years.
And the text mentions this deeply enhances task significance and task identity.
Right, which sounds very academic, but to put that in plain English, it's like the difference between being an assembly line worker and being a master artisan.
Okay, I like that. Expand on that.
Well, an assembly line worker just installs the car door over and over. All day long, they never see the finished car drive away. That's traditional teaching. You install third grade math and they move on.
Right.
But an artisan builds the entire car from scratch. Looping makes teachers artisans. They aren't just teaching a kid division. They are watching that child evolve from an anxious 6-year-old into a confident 9-year-old. They see the whole puzzle.
If we connect this to the bigger picture and look at how that impacts the psychological architecture, task identity is the ultimate fuel for the dedication dimension of engagement.
Because you're so invested.
Completely. When you can literally witness the long-term, holistic developmental impact you are having on a human life, the work transcends being a job. It solidifies that moral calling.
But, and this is big bait, but redesigning a schedule, cutting paperwork, implementing looping, these still feel like really brilliant top-down mandates.
They are.
How do you prevent the slow, inevitable creep of bureaucracy from just piling back up over a 30-year career? Because if a teacher is going to sustain vigor and dedication for decades, they can't just be grateful subjects of a benevolent administration. They need actual agency.
You've hit the nail on the head. This requires a fundamental shift in how power and learning operate within the institution.
Okay, so how do they do it?
Traditionally, professional development is a profoundly passive, autonomy-killing experience. Teachers sit in a cafeteria while an outside expert talks at them about a new mandate they are expected to flawlessly execute.
Usually while eating a stale bagel.
Exactly. To counter this, schools like Meadowbrook Elementary in Australia shifted entirely to active agency. They invested in weekly, 90-minute professional learning communities, or PLCs, driven entirely by formative assessment data.
Okay, let's clarify formative assessment data really quickly for anyone who isn't a teacher.
Sure.
A typical final exam is a summative assessment. It's an autopsy. It tells you the student failed after it's too late to fix it.
Right, the learning period is over.
But formative assessment is like checking the patient's vitals while they're still on the operating table. It's a real-time check-in, like a quick quiz on a Tuesday, that tells a teacher exactly who didn't understand fractions before they move on to the next chapter.
Precisely. And by giving teachers 90 minutes of protected time every single week to sit together, analyze those real-time vitals, and collaboratively design new instructional strategies, you fundamentally alter their professional identity.
They are in the driver's seat.
Yes, they are no longer passive consumers of top-down mandates. They become active knowledge generators. This intensely targets the environmental mastery pillar of well-being. They feel competent, capable, and in control of their craft.
But giving teachers that much control requires a radical amount of trust from leadership.
It does. It requires leaders to let go of their ego.
And the most mind-blowing example of this in the text is Learning Elementary in Japan. They adopted a philosophy of adaptive management that honestly sounds like it belongs in a Silicon Valley startup, not a primary school.
Oh, this is my favorite part of the research.
They treat every single school policy as a current working hypothesis.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, treating policy as a hypothesis completely removes the ego from institutional leadership. It acknowledges the inherent uncertainty in complex human systems like a school.
Yeah, they stopped treating school policies like sacred laws carved in stone and started treating them like software updates.
Exactly. The rules are always in beta.
Right. If a new bell schedule or a new recess policy isn't working, it's not viewed as a failure of leadership or a failure of the staff to just comply harder.
It just means the users found a bug.
Yes. The hypothesis was disproved by the evidence, and it's time to code a new patch.
It creates an incredibly resilient culture of collective learning. When a teacher knows that a frustrating policy can be challenged with data and changed without stigma, their autonomy is completely validated.
The system listens to them.
Exactly. The structural environment is actively responding to their professional feedback. When you combine that adaptive software update mentality with the structural removal of cognitive load and the meaningful design of looping, you create the exact environmental conditions where psychological well-being thrives.
And as we've learned, that well-being naturally constructs the deep work ethic that makes true engagement inevitably emerge.
It's a brilliant, interconnected system.
So what does this all mean for you listening? We have spent this deep dive really dismantling the idea that engagement is a commodity you can buy with a retention bonus or enforce with a strict performance review.
You can't force it.
You just can't. It is a highly fragile, incredibly powerful psychological state. Vigor, dedication, and absorption only appear when a worker's well-being and personal values are fiercely protected by the structural design of their environment.
And while Dr. Westover's research focuses intensely on the specific ecosystem of private primary education, this sequence of human motivation, that structural support enables well-being, well-being builds work ethic, and work ethic drives engagement, is a completely universal mechanism.
It applies to everyone listening right now. Whether you are a teacher navigating a chaotic classroom, a manager in a tech firm dealing with endless Zoom fatigue,
A nurse in a crowded ward.
or just someone trying to understand the root cause of your own Sunday night dread. We all need the resilience of vigor. We all need the deep pride of dedication. And we all crave that flow state of absorption.
Absolutely.
And we simply cannot get there if our own psychological architecture is being structurally crushed by the systems we work within. You can't just mandate a beautiful home if you are only willing to measure the rent.
That's the bottom line.
As we wrap up today, I want you to think about that brilliant software update concept from Learning Elementary in Japan. Look at your own workplace, your own daily routines, or even your own personal life. What permanent rule, what exhausting expectation, or what unquestioned checklist for a good job is actually just an outdated, buggy hypothesis desperately waiting to be disproved by you? That is something to mull over. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.